skirts, tugging at them as if to cover herself. The sight pierced him. "Alicia!" His voice broke. "Who did this?"
"Strangers."
Her breathing was labored.
"I called for help. No one came."
Her fingers pulled at his shirt.
"Will,"
she managed, burrowing against him. For a moment she seemed to hold her breath. Then her body slowly grew limp. William clutched her to his heart as his beloved's life seeped out of her body. He lifted his eyes to the dark sky above and cried out. Chapter 1. July 1st, 2013, Umbria, Italy. The Prince of Florence stood outside a house in Umbria, conflicted. He'd already paid his respects to the princess of the region, managing to avoid her romantic overtures. He'd enjoyed her body on previous occasions. She was beautiful, intelligent, and vibrantly sexual, as were most of his kind. On this night, however, he'd found her charms wanting. Having politely declined her invitation to fornicate, he hunted on Umbrian lands with her begrudging permission. Locating Professor Gabriel Emerson and his family was easy. He and his wife, Julianne, owned the house that stood majestically on a hill, the lights from its windows cheering the darkness. The prince's conflict was not in finding the Emersons or in escaping the embrace of the princess. No, his conflict derived from a promise. Ravenwood was human, beautiful in an unconventional way, and very brave. She was also protective of others, including strangers. In a tender moment, she'd exacted a promise from him that he would spare the lives of the Emersons. He'd made the promise in good faith, not just because he wished her to confide in him about her mysterious past, but because he cared for her and longed to make her happy. Since she'd quit him, making it clear she could not accept the fact that he was incapable of love, he'd been tempted to go back on his promise and punish the professor for having the audacity to claim rightful ownership of stolen works of art. That he did so unknowingly was no excuse. The prince desired revenge, and now that the only human in the world who could persuade him to indulge in mercy had rejected him, he had no reason to forego it. That was how he'd come to stand outside the house, listening as Catherine Picton, an older friend of the family, bade her hosts good night, and Claire, the infant daughter of the Emersons, was put to bed in her parents' room. He waited impatiently while the Emersons pursued their pleasure in a hot tub that was placed on the balcony off their bedroom. The prince wrinkled his nose as their marital union dragged on and on. It seemed every time he encountered the couple they were engaging in intercourse. He tapped his leather-clad foot on the garden floor, willing them to couple faster. It was a starless night, dark and still. The sky was a velvet arc above him, while the summer breeze whispered in his ear. As he heard Julianne cry out in pleasure, he remembered Raven doing the same while he gently loved her. His jaw clenched. Love. A polite euphemism for the joining of bodies for physical pleasure. And yet he could not be scornful of the term when applied to her. It had been almost a month since he'd known the pleasure of a woman, almost a month since he'd had Raven in his bed. He could still feel the warmth of her skin beneath his hands, the soft curves of her figure as he caressed her, the scent of her blood as it filled his nostrils. But it was the memory of her green eyes that kept him still as Julianne kissed her husband and returned to their room. Raven had large eyes that brimmed with feeling. "Don't you ever tire of death?" Her voice interrupted his thoughts. The truth was that he did tire of death. Even now he felt conflicted. But the prince tamped down his misgivings and scaled the wall of the villa, eager to surprise the professor while he was alone. And surprise him he did. "We meet again." The prince's conversational tone belied his menacing figure. Startled, Gabriel stood in the hot tub, his wet, naked body shining in the dim light that shone from the bedroom. "What do you want?" he barked, fingers curving into